They're everywhere, on rooftops, in your garbage bin, even on public transit. They're even bold enough to break into our homes.
Look at this. Yeah, don't worry, I won't take your English muffin.
And remember that time we mourned a dead raccoon that didn't get picked up by the city? It started out as a joke, but then sparked a vigil with flowers and candles and a remembrance photo that went viral in Toronto. It's safe to say, raccoons have become Toronto's unofficial mascot. Some people love them.
They're pretty cute, like 90% of the time.
And others, not so much.
You know, I've never disliked an animal before as much as, yeah, it's awful.
Okay, so our relationship with raccoons is complicated. Is Toronto the raccoon capital of Canada? You, of course, want to know, how many are there? And are there more living here than anywhere else across the country? The truth is, no one, not even the people who study them, know how many raccoons exist in Canada. And we confirm that by reaching out to every major city, province, and federal agencies that could potentially track raccoons. But what we did find out is they definitely don't live in Newfoundland or in the Northern Territories. Biologists say the only time they track animal population is if they're diseased or going extinct. The closest number experts have come to is 100 raccoons per square kilometer in Toronto, but that's an estimate.
Actually, people often say Toronto is the raccoon capital of the world. I think we should claim that title. I'm Dr. Suzanne McDonald. I'm a professor at York University, and I study animal behavior. It's a glamorous life I lead that I actually measure dead raccoons.
I've actually heard that Toronto is the raccoon capital of North America. My name is Brad Gates. My company is Gates Wildlife Control. We've been in the humane wildlife removal business for over 34 years. I was known as the raccoon guy in my neighborhood. Fortunate enough to actually raise a baby raccoon from 2 weeks of age to an adult. I was its mother, basically.
And your raccoon had a name?
The raccoon's name was Mandy, yes.
Brad and Suzanne are among Canada's top raccoon experts. They think there are 3 major reasons why raccoons not only survive, but thrive in Toronto. First, they say the critters are indigenous to this part of southern Ontario and have adapted like few other animals to city life.
They are here only. They're supposed to only be here. They evolved here. They are our North American species.
The word raccoon comes from an Algonquin word, a raccoon, meaning one that rubs, scrubs, and scratches with its hands. Other indigenous peoples across Canada, like the Salish on the west coast and the Mi'kmaq on the east, trapped and sold raccoon pelts. Our part of southern Ontario, particularly Toronto, sitting right next to Lake Ontario, has a lot of waterways for raccoons to get around.
And then we sort of moved in and built up around them, and they just said, okay, and they just kept breeding. But this kind of Lake Ontario with all the rivers that go into the lake, that's like perfect raccoon land.
Secondly, the raccoon is built to survive the city, from their biology to their learned habits, to how they seek out new things.
Raccoons, if you put something down that they've never seen before, the first thing they do is grab it. So they have, instead of this trait to be afraid of things, which is called neophobia, which just means new phobia, right? They have neophilia, which means that they like new things, and they will actually approach and investigate new things. They see our garbage cans and they say, great, they have their little paws and they say, wonderful, thank you, you know? Whereas most species would not approach human structures like that.
On top of that, they have no natural predators in a city, and they adapt pretty quickly to their surroundings.
They're one of the few species that learns from their successes and their mistakes. So if a raccoon makes a mistake and it ends up not being beneficial to it, it won't do it again.
Thirdly, we, yes, us, humans, have engineered Toronto for raccoons.
Because it's an older city, there's rotting wood, there's structures that have access underneath them. So there's no shortage of that.
The number of trees that we have is really helpful. Our houses are quite close together, especially downtown. Lots of fences that allow the raccoons to go quickly between yards.
There are hot spots, of course, but they're pretty much in every neighborhood.
We follow Brad up into a raccoon's den in an attic.
Hey, Mom, stay away. Stay away.
Where a mama raccoon is protecting her young. Companies like Brad's don't kill the raccoons. Their customers just want them out of the house. Brad brings the baby raccoons out into a heated box to keep them warm, letting them cry. But don't worry, Mom's coming back for them one by one to find another den.
All raccoons have multiple den sites. So even though they're living in your house, they have 5 or 6 in the neighborhood that they've established.
What they also need is food. And in a city of nearly 3 million people, we do a pretty good job of leaving scraps out for them.
They can survive on anything. So if you give them junk food, they like that. If you give them insects, they like that. If you give them fish, they like that. If you give them fruit, they like that. Pretty much everything, they like that. Whereas coyotes, for example, they can't. They have to eat meat.
But Toronto isn't the only North American city with a big raccoon population.
Chicago is a very similar city to Toronto, and they have a similar raccoon kind of population. Some people have estimated Baltimore, parts of Baltimore, with over 300 per square kilometer. So again, those are pockets of raccoon. There are definitely lots of raccoons in Vancouver. There's a large alleyway system behind buildings in Vancouver, and the raccoons will go in the alleyways. They don't really give them a second thought. And certainly, interestingly, I haven't seen them getting into their green bins.
The city of Toronto spent $31 million over a decade on redesigned garbage cans, so-called raccoon-proofed bins. It didn't take long for the raccoons to figure them out. There's an entire industry built on us humans trying to outsmart raccoons.
Basically emits a really high-pitched, supersonic type noise. But this noise really annoys the raccoons.
So, are these guys actually getting smarter?
That's actually a good question. I don't know if they're getting smarter, but they're certainly applying their intelligence in different ways.
It's dinner time.
Every time we ratchet up our attempts to keep them out of things, we're actually making them smarter. So it is an evolutionary arms race that those animals that can survive what we throw at them pass those genes on to their offspring who will also survive. And so over time, we're ending up with smarter, more urban savvy animals.
What's not in any doubt is that raccoons are a symbol of Canada's largest city. We identify with them like no other animal.
These trash pandas sort of appeal to the Torontonian idea of the urban warrior.
They're always teaching me something new. They're outsmarting me in situations. I just love them.
Toronto is a raccoon city, and we just happen to live in it.